And this is not the one that I have a good handle on. This is the one that I think all of us probably struggle with. Can we choose joy through suffering? Here's what I've found, folks, and here's what I've come to understand. A big part of choosing joy is to allow the Lord to align my heart and my mind with Him. And when I allow the Lord to align my heart and my mind with Him, I can walk in joy. My dad was an automobile mechanic for many years, and once he taught me how to align headlights on a car. And this is back in the older days than we have now. It was actually a big thing with mirrors on it and a suction cup. And anybody ever worked with one of those before? How many here would remember that? You stuck it on there and it had mirrors that surely they've got something better than that now. Do they? Somebody tell me they can do it differently now. But it was mirrors you lined up to get your headlights. And it was an old car and we did that. And he said it's important for them to be in alignment. It is so important, church, for our heart and our mind to be in alignment with the thought, with the mind, with the heart, and with the will of God. And when He gets us in alignment with Him, we can truly walk in joy. The Apostle Paul chose joy time and time and time again. In every opportunity he had to get bitter, in every opportunity he had to stay angry, he chose to walk in joy. And I think the reason was that his heart was so aligned with the heart of God. Now, the Apostle Paul was an expert in suffering because he suffered a lot. And I love this fact about the Apostle Paul's life, that God was honest with him when he called him about the suffering that he would go through. Now, Paul was a persecutor of Christians. His name was Saul. And this is an amazing story in the New Testament. If you're not aware of it, the Apostle Paul, who wrote the book of Philippians in our study and who wrote most of the New Testament, before he came to Christ, he persecuted the church. He would go into cities and have Christians thrown in jail because of their faith. He was the biggest persecutor of the church that had ever lived, and he became the greatest preacher that the church ever knew. Don't tell me Jesus can't change a life. He can turn a life around 180 degrees. Paul was on his way actually to find more Christians and to have them thrown in jail when he ran into Jesus on the road, and Jesus spoke to him out of a blinding light. And Saul found himself on the ground. He was converted dramatically, but after his conversion, he went back home and he was blind. He couldn't see. So God spoke to a man named Ananias, and he said, Ananias, here's where Saul is. I want you to go down there and pray with him and give him his first baby steps as a Christian. Ananias said, I don't know about this, Lord. Anybody ever said that when God asked you to do something? I don't know about this, Lord. Have you heard of this guy? This could be a trap. This guy gets Christians thrown in jail, and you're asking me to go and minister to the greatest persecutor? Let me just tell you, obey God even when it doesn't make sense. You may open a door that will change the world. Ananias went down, and he visited with Saul there, and he prayed for him. But here's what God said to Ananias, and I want you to hear about the calling of Paul. God said to Ananias, go. For Saul is my chosen instrument to take my message to the Gentiles and to kings, as well as to the people of Israel. What an incredibly high calling. Imagine that. God looks at the guy persecuting, trying to destroy the church, and says, that's the one I'm going to use to take my message to the world. God can use anybody. Amen. Paul was highly educated. God can even use smart people. God can even use PhDs. Amen. You didn't laugh at that one like I thought you would, but okay, we'll go on. He said, he's my chosen instrument to take my message to the Gentiles and to kings. This man is going to stand before kings as well as to the people of Israel. What a high calling. Then God talked about the second part of his calling. He said, and I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake. Imagine that. Everybody wants to receive the first part, stand before kings. I want to be God's messenger. I want God to move in my life and use my life for his purposes, but not everybody wants to latch on to this second part. In fact, nobody wants to latch on to this second part initially. For God said, I'm going to show him that suffering is going to be a big part of his life, a big part of his mission, and a big part of his calling. And indeed it was. Paul was called to tremendous ministry. He was also called to great suffering for Christ, and he suffered. In his public ministry, Paul was converted probably about age 30. He was martyred, killed for his faith when he was around 60, so he had 30 years there. He spent about 14 of those in the wilderness hearing from God. That leaves him 15. He spent about 5.5 of those as a prisoner. So he only really had about 9.5 years when he was completely free to move around and to preach out in public. Yet he maintained this incredible joy through this suffering. I don't want to gloss this over. I don't want to speed past this because there is a thinking in the world today that if you're a Christian, you should never suffer. That if you're really following Jesus, that nothing will ever go wrong in your life. And you get books out there sometimes that promise, follow Jesus and everything's going to be easy. I mean, that's what they say. You go to a bookstore or you search Amazon and there'll be books everywhere about how Jesus wants to make your life better. And I say, amen, he does. You've heard me preach that. He wants to bless you. He wants to heal you. He wants to deliver you. He wants to move in your life and do great things. And it's true, anytime people come to Jesus, their life gets better. Did you know every time the message of the gospel goes into a country, especially an underdeveloped country, when people receive the message of the gospel, the level of that country always goes up. The prosperity of that country increases. Business grows, right? Good things happen. But what I want to guard against is this idea that Jesus died to make your life better. If that's the only thing we believe, and if that's our number one focus, we can never receive this message. If it's just that Jesus died to make things easy for me, we're not going to be ready for the days to come.